Hello, everybody, and welcome to our contribution to the Humanitarian Library. My name is Michael,
And my name is Lyra.
and we are both juniors, part of the Los Sanchez project at Harvard's Engineers Without Borders chapter. For our Humanitarian Library contribution, we decided to focus on the relationships to in-country partners, and specifically we looked at a case study of the Pinolito project, and within that project, the August 2013 assessment trip, where the chapter ran into some difficulties and frustrations with their in-country partners. So before we get into the specifics of the frustrations that the chapter had with their in-country partners, we're first going to give a little background on Pinolito itself. So the project is a very important part of the chapter's history because it was the first large-scale implementation trip that the chapter encountered, and it was their first major success. The goal of the project was to redesign and repair a community water supply system. However, there were multiple hardships and frustrations with the in-country partners that the chapter was dealing with. Because of these frustrations, which led to miscommunications and ultimately delays in work being done, we thought it would be a good idea to dive into these frustrations and why there were miscommunications with the in-country partners and how we can minimize these delays and improve our chapter's works in the future. The lessons learned here are applicable to future humanitarian endeavors more broadly beyond just our chapter. So some more background on Pinolito. Specifically, it's a water distribution project located in Pinolito, which is near Constanza, the Dominican Republic. Pinolito is very close to our current project in Los Sanchez. It's only about a 20-minute drive away, and we often visit Pinolito to check in on the system when we're on our implementation trips in Los Sanchez. There are approximately 200 people living in the community, so it's a little bit smaller than Los Sanchez, and we worked there from 2012 to 2015. The major construction tasks that were involved with the trip were the drilling of a well and also the construction of implementation and distribution piping to the community.
We are now going to dive into the importance of in-country partners. A lot of humanitarian aid projects are in different places in different countries that are very unfamiliar. They have different languages and the cultures are very different from what we're used to. Therefore, it's important to have in-country partners who can act as both cultural liaisons, and these in-country partners can also organize and prepare different operations before and after the team is on the ground. With cultural liaisons, the cultural liaisons are able to provide a connection and able to talk with the in-country partners to make sure that the in-country partners are both trustworthy and reliable. It's super important that beforehand you know that you're able to come to the country and that the in-country partner will be there ready to help out. During the August 2013 trip in Pinolito, we had an in-country contact whose name was Manuel Vasquez, but everybody in the community and around the area called him El Gobierno. We first initially found him through Luis, who is a community leader in Pinolito, and as we heard from Larry, who is a professional mentor that came with us on the trip, and from the project leads, he was a man of many traits. So we thought that Manuel Vasquez was going to be a great in-country contact. He had been very helpful with different information and connections, and he was also going to be the point person for the drilling process, to get supplies, and to get other subcontractors. Again, the project leads and Larry, the professional mentor, thought that he was very knowledgeable and well connected. To this extent, people knew him around the community, and therefore he had a street named after him. Therefore, with all of these different things, we believed that Manuel Vasquez was a trusted partner. Because we believed that El Gobierno was a trusted and reliable in-country contact, we asked him to help us with the well, and he agreed to help with the well drilling. Apparently in the past, he had supervised many well drillings, but he didn't actually have his own rig. El Gobierno is also the head electrician for a local hydroelectric dam, and he had a lot of side jobs as well. The project leads explained to us that they were concerned with his electrical capabilities, which is important because there's a lot of electrical components involved in the process of building the distribution system.
So as Lyra mentioned, El Gobierno seemed like a very well-connected man with many resources and many connections that could be beneficial into helping the team get what they need to be done on the ground. However, after speaking with members of the team, they think that there are some initial warning signs or red flags that they should have picked up on initially when they were doing their work with El Gobierno. After speaking with Manuel Ramos, who was a translator on the August 2013 trip, he told us some of the red flags that he thought they should have picked up on. For example, he said that he always worked on his own and he would never write anything down. Additionally, he would ask for money to run some errands, but he would never give them receipts. Now, while these may be cultural differences, it's important to keep your finances in line and make sure work is being done. Just because by not writing anything down and by not giving receipts, the team loses some organizational capabilities, and with nothing being written down, it opens up the opportunity for miscommunication and for work to fall through the cracks. Beyond that, there was actually no contract written. It was more of a gentleman's agreement between the chapter and El Gobierno. And because there was no contract written, there was no set price, so there was no detailed quote or summary of fees owed. Now these are more warning signs for the team because it just means that it is more difficult for them to keep track of their finances and keep track of the work and communication that is happening between the in-country partner and the chapter. Beyond that, it's not as much of a warning sign. However, El Gobierno wanted a crossbow as a gift for his service, which doesn't really speak to a warning sign. However, it is indicative of there being no contract written and no set price. So now, after having reviewed El Gobierno, which is the in-country contact that the team was dealing with, we're now going to shift gears a little bit and go over the timeline of events that the team encountered when they landed in Pinolito on the August 2013 implementation trip. So first off, when they got there, after speaking with Larry Bentley, who is the professional mentor with an expertise in drilling, he mentioned that they said it was all clay. However, you can see weathered rock on the way to the top of the hill. Now this is an issue because the drill that El Gobierno had acquired for the team, its downhole hammer or part to drill through rock was actually broken. So this meant an immediate delay as soon as the team was on the ground. So what the team did is they met with El Gobierno and Bismar, who was the engineer managing that rig, and they planned to get a new downhole hammer near Haiti. However, Haiti is about an 8 to 10 hour drive away from Pinolito each way, which would have meant that it's easily at least a day or two extra delay added on top of that. However, there was a personal emergency with someone involved, specifically Bismar, so he was not able to go get that part, which meant that the team was kind of in a scramble. However, El Gobierno, using his connections and resources, was actually able to acquire another rig for the team. This rig was owned by Maximo Jimenez. However, once Maximo's rig got to the site and started drilling on day 7 of 10, they found out that Maximo's rig could not actually drill through rock. It did not have a downhole hammer. And there was not enough time to get a downhole hammer at this point, so the team was forced to plug the incomplete borehole on this trip. So when Maximo's rig arrived quite late in the trip in the second half, it encountered more problems than just not having a downhole hammer when the team encountered rock about 40 feet down. After speaking with Larry Bentley, the professional mentor with an expertise in drilling, he told us that the driller brought a rig from Florida, and Florida is a flat state. Because of this, the drill rig actually only had leveling hydraulics over one of its axles, and where we're drilling, it was on top of a hill. This meant there was a lot of trouble with leveling the rig on this hillside. They spent multiple days just trying to get the rig level so they can drill straight down. And it turned out even when they started drilling, the borehole was not completely straight. To make things worse, it turned out El Gobierno didn't tell the rig operators the full details about the job. And this is what led to them not having the downhole hammer, and also for them being generally unprepared for the job. For example, the workers were missing hydraulic fluid, and they were asking to borrow simple tools from the community, things like monkey wrenches and things like that.
In addition, there are some troubles with money. Initially, the chapter gave 40,000 pesos to El Gobierno. However, the workers who were working for Maximo Jimenez kept asking the chapter for even more money on top of this. This happened because this 40,000 pesos wasn't transferred over and wasn't being used to complete the job. What should have happened is that the first 50% that the chapter gave should have been used for implementation, and then the second 50% should have come after the job was completed. That's when the last transfer should have occurred. However, the workers were asking the chapter for money, and they claimed that this money would be discounted from the missing 50%. However, this is not how it should work. The initial 50% should be used for the implementation, and then the last 50% should come after the job is completed. There are even more issues with money when El Gobierno lost about $500. There's a very tense exchange about this between Manuel Ramos, who is the translator who is representing the chapter, and El Gobierno. Manuel Ramos had to diffuse this exchange, so it's super important throughout the process to support your translator during the trip. The chapter came to the conclusion that El Gobierno had possibly embezzled this money. Larry Bentley, who is the mentor on the trip, thought that the in-country contact was trying to scam them. Therefore, because of this issue and a bunch of other issues that had happened with El Gobierno, the chapter decided to not work with El Gobierno again in the future.
So to summarize, at the end of the August 2013 trip, the chapter left Pinalito with an incomplete borehole, and after many miscommunications and frustrations with their in-country contact, El Gobierno, they decided they did not want to work with him in the future. However, moving forward, the majority of the project's implementation was completed in January 2014. This implementation trip involved redrilling another borehole because the original one turned out to not have been exactly straight, and to also build the distribution piping to the community to complete the system. On this trip, they did not work with El Gobierno, and they did not work with him on future trips after this one. Instead, they worked directly with Maximo and his crew to drill the well, and they found this to be much less of a pain than to deal directly with El Gobierno. And happily, the system still works today, and when we check in on Pinalito when we're on our implementation trips in Los Sanchez, we see that the community members are still happy with the system and it's still functioning properly. So after speaking with various members of on the travel team in the implementation trip in August 2013, we asked them if they had any major lessons learned. And what they told us we found to be very applicable to both Los Sanchez and Mukatani and humanitarian endeavors more broadly. The first lesson that they stressed was to avoid as many intermediaries as possible. As we can see with El Gobierno on the August 2013 trip, when he was acting as a middleman to deal with various other contractors, many miscommunications arose, and this ended up causing delays and ultimately ended up with work not being completed. So it's important for when you're in countries with unfamiliar cultural norms to be aware that miscommunication can be an issue and to try and stay on top of it as much as possible. One way to do that is to eliminate as many intermediaries and middlemen as possible, because it's important to keep in mind that things can be lost in translation from one group to another. Another point that they emphasized is that if you give money to a contractor, emphasize that that money needs to be used on the job. Throughout the Pinalito project, there were many times where some subcontractors, workers would make repeated requests for money, things like gas money or tools, etc., when the money that was paid for implementation had already been given to the contractor. By emphasizing that the money you give the contractor is to be used on the job, this avoids repetitive requests for more money throughout the job, it clarifies what you're paying for, and it helps you keep a stricter budget.
There are even more major lessons learned that we can connect back to Los Sanchez and Mukatani. It's important from the beginning to emphasize accounting and to establish your budget as much as you can in advance. This then allows you to be very disciplined about your budget when you're in country, and therefore you can avoid quotes on the fly. Additionally, it's extremely important to have a cultural liaison who knows how business is done in the communities and understands the different norms that happen there. These cultural liaisons are also helpful in building different relationships. We're extremely lucky in our chapter to have some great cultural liaisons. For the Los Sanchez project, we have both Sam and Oscar, who are great cultural liaisons. They understand the different norms and how business is done in the community. Additionally, on Mukatani, we have Calvin, who's from Tanzania, so he can also help and understand how business is done. Lastly, it's also important to support your translator throughout the process. A lot of the community members think that these translators are the face of the project, and so they think that these translators are the ones who make the big decisions. It's important for the chapter to support these people because they have such a big role in the project. It's an extremely large burden as a translator to be talking with community members, so throughout the process, Be sure and support these members of the team. Furthermore, there are a few more major lessons learned that we can connect back. From the beginning, it's important to make plans in advance. If you can have plans and backup plans, that won't avoid problems coming up, but it will help you prepare for different situations that might arise. Additionally, the chapter in Pinolito deferred a lot of the planning to El Gobierno, but when it turned out that he wasn't reliable, they were in sort of a scramble. So therefore, it's important to have these backup plans so that if something goes wrong, you know what to do going forward. A lot of these different lessons connect back to Muctani and Luz Sanchez. So if we take these lessons into consideration as we go forward, our chapters and projects will go even more smoothly.